Are you now live, Chair?
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. I'd like to begin this meeting of the CPCA Housing and Communities Committee by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Combined Authorities website. Owing to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels, Coronavirus, Flexibility of Local Authority and Police Crime Panel Meetings, England and Wales Regulations 2020. To members of the public, if you do not want to be identifiable, please choose a pseudonym. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Combined Authorities website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted, except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. And I would remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. Right, now move on to the attendance. I'll begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. Please confirm your presence when I say your name. Councillor Steve Allen.
I'm present, housing member for Peterborough City Council, portfolio holder for housing, culture and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Hickford.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Sargent.
Present.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Chris Bowden. Would the Democratic Services Officer please report on any apologies for absence?
No apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Would you please click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now if you do wish to declare an interest? No one has declared an interest. Although it's not a disclosable pecuniary interest, in the interests of transparency, I would just like to declare that on agenda item 2.23, which is the application for housing grant on March Town Centre, that the sites involved are currently owned by Cambridgeshire County Council, and I am a Cambridgeshire County Councillor. However, the application is for a grant to a third party, not to Cambridgeshire County Council, and I've been advised that that doesn't in any way prejudice my ability to continue to participate in this meeting. And I dare say, Councillor Fuller, you'd care to make the same, and for that matter, Councillor Hickford, you'd care to make the same declarations that you are Cambridgeshire County Councillors.
No, thank you, Chairman. It's on my register of interests.
No, I appreciate that. And it's on mine as well, but I just wanted to do it for the sake of transparency in this meeting.
And you've done it for us all, Chair. Thank you.
Fine. Right, if it does occur to anyone during the course of the meeting that they do have a disclosable pecuniary interest, would you please declare that immediately as soon as it does occur to you? Thank you. We may now move on to the next agenda item, 1.2, which are the minutes of the last meeting. And we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 27th of April 2020 as being a correct record. And may I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function on the right hand of your screen now. And the first person I see is Councillor Smith. Bridget.
Thank you very much. So I don't know if I'm not recalling properly, but it's the fact that we're not referred to by name. We're just referred to as a member. I can't remember if that's what we normally do, but I would certainly like to request that for the purposes of this meeting, that I am referred to by name rather than just as a member. We don't do this in the board papers, do we? We're all mentioned by name. It just seemed a bit odd to me.
I think I'd like some advice from Democratic Services on that one, please.
For committee meeting purposes, we don't usually mention councillors by name. It's just for the board meeting minutes that we tend to mention by name. I don't know if Rochelle has a view on this.
No particular view. That has been the style that we've adopted previously, but if there's a request for today, members to be noted by name, we can absolutely accommodate that request.
Councillor Smith.
So I just think it reads very, very strangely indeed. I'm not aware of any other committee I sit on where there's that level of sort of anonymity. And I think particularly as we are often dealing with applications that pertain to our own district, I think actually, our being more upfront about this is actually relevant. So I'm making the request on my behalf, and obviously it's up to colleagues what they feel about themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm aware of many local authorities, including ones where I serve, where this is the standard practice. However, unless anyone feels strongly to the contrary, I'm perfectly happy for at this meeting for members to be referred to by name in the minutes being brought together for today's meeting. However, it is something I think which we will need to refer back to the CPCA for some consideration, and I think it should be consistent across the board. But so far as today's meeting is concerned, I'm perfectly happy, unless anyone objects, that we do name the individual councillors who say any specific things which are recorded in the minutes. Any objections? Please raise your right hand. No objections. Okay, so we shall do so if that's okay with Democratic Services. Are there any other comments about the accuracy of the minutes? Please do raise your hand. So if any member doesn't agree with the proposal to accept the minutes of the meeting as a correct record, then now's your one chance to raise your right hand, the raised hand function. And since I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, I will take those as carried. Moving on from that to the action log. An updated action log was included in the published papers for this meeting. I certainly have one comment to make about one of the...
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt, but can we take matters arising rather than the action log first?
We can, although technically I don't know if matters arising are actually on the agenda, are they? But if you do have any matters which are arising which aren't going to be covered elsewhere in today's agenda, then certainly. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I've got quite a few, Chair. Really to get updates as much as anything rather than anything else. So on page 5 and going on to page 6, I wondered what progress there had been made with the MHCLG in terms of the end of year review. I don't think that was mentioned in the 100 million report unless I missed it. And also whether all the funding had been released now, because
we've got a very clear answer available to that one. To start off with, Councillor Sargent. Roger Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sargent, the situation at the moment is that we are continuing with our review with MHCLG. In terms of the financial position, I think you're aware that £17 million was issued directly to Cambridge City for your programme, I think in mid-March. We have a further £60 million that we are awaiting to receive of the £170 million. A meeting is being arranged for what we're hoping actually will be a final review in early September with MHCLG, which will hopefully deal with the release of that £60 million. In addition, there is a discussion going on around the end date for the programme. We always envisage the programme ending as at 31st March 2022. MHCLG have raised an issue. I think technically they're suggesting the programme should be ending on the 31st March 2021, which clearly we're not agreeing with. I think that issue will hopefully also be dealt with at this review meeting in early March, where the suggestion is, I think that technically, in their eyes, we might apply to confirm that the programme will end in March 2022 and not March 2021. So that's where we're at the moment. And obviously I've got a further, more detailed review update on the £100 million programme in a later item.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, a couple of other points, Chair. Just want to highlight the impact on Cambridge tourism, which I know we discussed tourism last time, and we do want we would appreciate the support of the CA and the business board, and I think we asked for a report which hasn't come through yet.
I'll raise that under the action log if I may.
Okay, and the other point really is around the different types of affordability and need issues around the CA area, where also we're expecting a report. I see that's not coming until September, so I wouldn't want to see that in particular slip anymore, because obviously it has a major impact on our view on a lot of the schemes that are coming through.
I very much look forward, as you do, to seeing the report coming through in September. I think it's really important that all members appreciate the different problems that different parts of the combined authority area have, so far as viability and affordability. And I don't think that if we fail to have that adequate overview, I'm not sure that we can actually carry out our function here to the best of our ability. So I think that will not be delayed beyond September, and I think will be a very interesting report and should be quite an interesting debate. You still have your hand up, Councillor Sargent. Anything further? No, good. Right. So talking about the action log, we do have an item on the action log, was minute 68, which was a position statement concerning tourism. And a statement was circulated to members of this committee on Thursday, which was entitled, What Are We Doing in COVID Recovery for the Tourism Sector? Obviously, with it being circulated on Thursday, it was too late to be included within the documents for this meeting. But within the body of that document, what was clear is that it's really the CPCA Business and Skills team which is currently working on tourism and other areas in order to produce a local recovery plan, which would be published probably in September. And the current situation, so far as tourism is concerned, is so fluid and so uncertain that for us to take action before then and to start discussing our strategic oversight of tourism really would be almost talking in the dark. So on sight of that paper in September, I believe that we'll first of all see a lot more about how the tourism sector is beginning to pick itself up again. And secondly, we'll then be able to move towards any strategic oversight matters which are appropriate for us to consider. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. You're breaking up an awful lot, Councillor Burden. I don't know if it's just me, but you're quite difficult to hear. So on that matter, so when we discussed the fact that the part of the remit of this board, this committee, is tourism, you know, it did seem to be a sort of orphan area at that time, and it seemed to have landed with this committee because there was actually nowhere else for it to go. Now, obviously, that was pre-COVID, and what COVID has done has absolutely shone a light on how critical the whole tourist trade is to all of us. And how fragile it is. So I do think that this committee needs to review whether actually there is whether we actually have a role in that, or whether, you know, it would sit more comfortably elsewhere permanently, because, you know, I think we all agreed it was with us because we didn't know where else to put it. But I think in light of COVID, that really needs to be reviewed now.
I think that's a very helpful and sensible suggestion, Councillor Smith. really trying to tag tourism into our community's strategic oversight responsibilities was to some extent grasping at straws. And my request to officers is that this be taken back and given some consideration, because quite clearly, whilst the business and skills team are doing a lot of work on tourism and the recovery of tourism at the moment, we need to be in a position somewhere within the CPCA where appropriate oversight does take place on the tourism sector. Councillor Sargent.
Just to let members know, there are a couple of meetings being held in the next couple of weeks with local shops and traders and the like, where we'll obviously get some feedback in terms of shops opening up. And no doubt, depending on what happens on the 4th of July, we'll have subsequent meetings with the hospitality area as well. But it is noticeable in Cambridge already that places are closing, restaurants and the like, permanently, long-standing ones of more than 30 years, I think. So, you know, we really have got to get to grips with this issue.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I would echo the sentiments of Councillor Smith and indeed to a degree Councillor Sargent. In Peterborough, I find that tourism is a little bit of an orphan subject as well, because it sits with economic development on Peterborough City Council, and so it doesn't match my presence here. And I know Councillor Walsh, who is your colleague on this committee beforehand, was conscious of that when she asked me to replace her because she doesn't have housing in her portfolio. So, you know, I do think it probably is due for a move to a more suitable location.
Thank you. If we may ask officers to action that investigation, please. And subject to that change, if members are happy to take the action log as noted. If any raised hands to object? If not, we will take that as noted. Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 1.3 is public questions, and we have received no public questions or petitions. So we'll move on to the next item of business, which I've got as the Combined Authority Forward Plan. And do any members have any comments to make about the Combined Authority Forward Plan? Relevant to our committee? No? In which case, we'll move on to the next agenda item, the Housing and Communities Committee Agenda Plan. And that's on pages 19 to 22. Do any committee members have any comments to make on the agenda plan? No, then we can move on to part 2 of the agenda, which is programme delivery. Our first report is on pages 23 to 44, and it's the £70 million affordable housing programme for Cambridge City. And may I ask Fiona Bryant to introduce this report, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bowden. I hope you can all hear me. This report is similar to the one that you had at the last committee because, as you're aware, the process is that reports are approved through our housing committee before they come here, and we haven't yet had a housing committee since the last report. Ironically, it's actually next week. However, just to give a brief update, you'll all be familiar with the report. I think the most important things to say at the moment are we are back on site, having had a brief hiatus because of COVID-19. All of the sites are back working again, obviously with social distance rules applied, but they are moving forward, although we are still doing a review as to any potential delays arising from that. We have the final 3 sites going into planning next month. That will be a remote planning committee. And the other thing is that since we were able to open up the sales on sites, to say that as far as we're concerned, based on the Mill Road site, that sales are actually keeping up and exchanges have broadly gone ahead as planned. We have had a couple of withdrawals, but the market seems to be holding up.
Thank you very much. Would any members of the committee wishing to ask a question or make a comment, please use the raised hand function at the right of your screen to indicate this. Councillor Sargent is first.
Thank you, Chair. If I can crave your indulgence slightly, because I'm picking up on a couple of points in the actual Cambridge City Council Housing Committee paper, but I think they're relevant to our general discussions, and obviously certainly in terms of accessible housing. I note that Cambridge City Council does include that in its housing programme of council houses. And I noted on a report we had previously that for Homes England, this is seen almost as a separate department, if you like. And, you know, I think we really ought to be looking going forward and making sure that where we can, developments that we grant aid do cover a full range of issues, including accessibility for people. And I don't know what the experience has been elsewhere in the area, but certainly homelessness has been a big issue in Cambridge, which we've been able to address with more than 100 people who've been on the street being able to be housed. And we've got some new temporary buildings as well to house the homeless, and it's going to be a challenge really to, without the necessary government funding, to fully sustain the success we've had so far in getting rough sleepers off the street.
Okay, on the first point, which is the accessibility one, I would imagine, but officers can tell me if I'm wrong, that this is to some extent a planning authority matter. Would officers care to respond to the question about accessibility standards? Roger.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Yeah, I mean, obviously we sort of talked about this issue previously. Yeah, we would like to be supportive of schemes that are offering accessible housing, but obviously not every scheme has accessible housing in it, and it does come back to planning and building control issues as well. So in principle, we're certainly supportive, and if there were grant opportunities to support accessible housing, then I'm sure my team would take that up.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I mean, obviously some of our schemes are quite small, but I would certainly think it's something we ought to be looking at with the larger schemes that do come through. You know, it's difficult to judge when it's only say 20 or 30, but certainly I think if it was for 100, or if we knew the background in the wider context on a site, it would be useful to know that you know, accessible housing is being provided in the whole site, and you know, to acknowledge what sort of contribution we're making.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to comment on Councillor Sargent's comments about rough sleepers? Roger.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Yeah, obviously our housing solutions are permanent solutions in terms of grant, etc. That there's in terms of rough sleeping, there's quite often a more temporary sort of requirement before you find a permanent solution, and you know, we try and support that where we can.
Thank you. Does any other member have any comment to make on this agenda item? Well, we're being asked to note the report on spend and outputs for the £70 million affordable housing programme, and I think there seems to be a general consensus in support of the recommendation, so I propose to take that recommendation as carried unless anyone objects. So we note the report. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is the £100 million affordable housing programme. And we have a number of individual items which are in front of us. We have 5 items. May I ask, first of all, on all 5 items, we do have confidential papers, where parts of the reports we've received are exempt from publication because they contain information relating to the financial or the business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Does anyone wish on any of the 5 items we have in front of us to go to refer to any of those confidential papers? Would help to be able to say so now. Councillor Sargent.
You'll be glad to hear, Chair, I don't actually want to talk about any of the exempt papers, but I did think 1 or 2 of them didn't actually need to be exempt, but whether they actually need to be attached to the documents, I think one of them might even have been something that's available on the web even. So, you know, I think we ought to be careful that we don't just put everything in exempt papers for the sake of it. So I would just ask that we are careful when we make things exempt when they don't need to be.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. There is an important principle that wherever possible, any papers which are placed before any committee are put into the public domain. So if you've spotted 1 or 2 which, in your opinion, shouldn't, would you please provide examples of that to me and to officers so that we can learn from that and make sure that we do better in future to have as many papers put into the public domain as we can?
Indeed.
Thank you very much, very helpful. Right, so if no members are going to refer to any of the confidential papers, then it's going to be possible for us to move through these more smoothly. We start off with the Halo Roman Fields Paston report, and may I ask Asma Ahmed Asma Ahmed Pierce to introduce this item.
Thank you, Councillor. Good afternoon. Right, I'll just start off with Roman Fields, Paston, Peterborough, Halo site. It's to ask to commit grant funding of 20 units of shared ownership at the grant amount of 645,000. They are all additional units currently being developed by Keep Moat, which was presented at the last committee. Shared ownerships will be helping the diversity of the home ownership offer, and the units are a mixture of 3 and 4 beds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sargent.
Sorry, my hand was up from the last time, but you're right, I do want to speak. I welcome that we have actually got full information on space standards going forward, which is very useful. But I will be commenting on when they're less than 100% of the national space standards. When we looked at the report back from our meeting with Housing England, we did actually see that they do require a check on anything that's significantly below the 100% mark of the national space standards, that the plans and room layouts are suitable for the right client group. And there's no indication on the report that that is the case. But the other point I want to make, and it comes across most of the proposals we've got this time, is it's not always very easy to see what additionality we've got. It would be very useful for us going forward to actually know what overall level of affordability there is on the whole site and how we are contributing to it as the CA. I mean, I think in some cases, of course, we're just trying to get up to the required affordable level, which is one issue. But I suspect, and perhaps the officer can answer that, I hope anyway, on this particular scheme, we're actually going above the level of affordable in the local plan for this area.
You did ask 2 questions, so we'll, in future, Councillor Sargent, you're more than welcome to break your questions up into individual ones. I won't ignore you, I won't fail to come back to you. But let's take each individual question in turn, if you don't mind. And the first question was to do with the national described space standards. And I'm assuming, well, in fact, I know that in all cases we are over the 85% figure, but I wonder if an answer can be given to the specific question that Councillor Sargent has.
Well, if it's helpful, Chair, if I can just read out what it said in the report of the meeting, because that sort of clarifies it. So it says, Homes England do inquire about units that might be significantly smaller than NDSS and ask for plans and room layouts to see if the units are suitable for the right client group. So that was the issue I'm raising. They're then saying anything significantly under 85% of NDSS is considered too small by Homes England. So my question really is, are we looking into proposals where the it's significantly below the national space standards? And if it is suitable, there might be extenuating circumstances, of course.
Thank you. Asma or
Yes, sure.
Roger? Asma.
I think what's actually happened is that it is, if anything is under 85% of national space standards, then Homes England investigates further, not anything under 100%. And we're taking the same sort of stance as Homes England.
Not my reading what I've just read out, Asma, to be honest.
Yes, I know, I do understand that.
Significantly under 85% is considered too small, which I would read to say they're not even going to contemplate it, but they're saying also that anything's significantly smaller than 100%, they will want to see plans and room layouts. So perhaps the officers could clarify that, because your reading is perhaps different to mine.
Roger.
Committee, I think the other point on this is that we do consult with the local housing representatives with all of these schemes. Asma, as part of the team, it's quite standard that she'll be speaking to the local housing team, and we discuss those schemes with them to see if they are supportive or not. And obviously behind that are the units appropriate, and sizing is part of that.
Thank you.
Can I have one last stab on this one then?
Of course you may, Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be useful then if it's below 100%, or whatever you decide is significantly smaller, you could actually indicate that in the table, you know, so we don't have to look around too much, you know, just to indicate it has been agreed with the local authority. Notwithstanding what they've obviously, hopefully they will have given planning permission, but I just think it would be useful from a housing perspective, which I think is different to a planning perspective, that they think it's suitable for the target group. Thank you.
I think we will come back on and confirm that. There's a question here, I think, of significance, and Asma was indicating, I think, rightly, that Homes England really only gets stuck into these things when you're at sort of 85% and below. It's quite rare for us to have a scheme that comes in at 85% or below. This case is a case in point where they range between 105% and 91%. And a lot of our schemes are going to be of that sort of nature. Each scheme will have some different units in it, and we'll come back, I think, with where we think there is a significantly under allocation, sizing.
Okay, I won't labour this anymore, Chair, but I mean, I think when we have the report about the needs and the local circumstances in September, I think it would be useful to reflect on this aspect as much as anything, because obviously there probably is different views around the county. So rather than us kicking this around too much each time, it would be useful to make sure that we include national space standards views from each local authority in that report.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. You did also ask about additionality and the assurance that we are actually seeing additionality in, and we are on this one item, so in this particular item that we are showing additionality.
That is correct. In all cases, they're all additional units, aside from any 106 units that are being delivered. Also, they are a side of that.
I'm quite happy with that answer, but I'm not sure that Councillor Sargent will be. And the question is whether the additionality is properly displayed and evidenced in the reports that we have in front of us.
Yeah, so if I can jump, actually, Chair, rather than us having to come back to this issue a little bit later on, for 2.22,
I'd rather we take one agenda
Sorry,
item.
no, I just want to illustrate the issue actually, because there it does actually say there doesn't need to be any affordable, while checking on the local plan for that area. I think it's right in saying the minimum is 25%. So it would be much easier for us all, I think, to know what the local plan requirement is and what's actually being delivered by our grant and also by the provision of more in general on the site.
I think the answer really has to be slightly more general than that, because it isn't always just a matter of the number of affordable properties being greater than the minimum which is required by the local plan in the area. There are economic factors which come into this as well. So I think each case needs to be looked at on its own merits in terms of the information to be provided to us to show what the additionality means. But maybe, Asma, you can give a more professional answer than the one I've just given.
Roger, sorry.
Sorry, thanks. Just to sort of interject slightly on this. In item 3.4 in this report, I think we're saying quite clearly that there's additionality, because these units in this scheme are being converted from open market sale units to affordable units, and we are saying that in the report. So I'm not quite sure what else we need to say in each report that Councillor Sargent might be seeking.
It's a fair challenge, Councillor Sargent. Councillor Sargent, you're muted.
It's so much simpler for us, though, if we can see this sort of information more of a tabular form than having to read the words. So I understand the concept that these are being converted, say, from market housing to affordable housing in whatever form. I understand that, but there is it's not clear then that we are then at the local plan level, meeting that, whether we're contributing to it or whether this is an addition to the local plan requirement. And rather than us just having to read the words and try and find out where the actual information is, if we had a more structured approach to these reports, which tell us where we are in terms of meeting local plan requirements and the level of affordability, the level of affordable housing on these sites, is much clearer for us in the way we've now got the information on space standards to just read that part of the report and to say, yeah, that's a tick in the box, I'm happy with that. That's my point.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. I'm always very keen to accommodate requests from members, but in this case, I just fear that we'll actually be missing the point about what additionality actually means. And additionality isn't necessarily anything to do with the local plan requirements. My understanding of additionality is that without the intervention of the combined authority, that there would be fewer affordable houses than with the intervention of the combined authority. And my understanding is that additionality is quite strictly defined in that way. Now, again, I might have got it wrong, and officers can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I fear that by introducing matters such as the local plan's affordable housing requirement, we'll actually be bringing red herrings into the calculation as to what additionality really is. I don't know if officers would care to comment on what additionality really is, and if I've got that right.
I think, Councillor Bowden, you've actually hit the nail on the head. I think it would bring more red herrings to the report writing of this. I do spend a lot of time working with our partners, making sure I fulfill the requirements of the reports that I put forward. And I've gone to many requests of providing MDS standards, but local plan issues are something that the planning authority really has to deal with. And it's more of a local thing rather than a CPCA thing. I'm just trying to make sure that I bring enough housing and the additionality to the combined authority. Planning is left with the local authorities of those districts. I haven't got any power or any sort of oomph to sort of say, please do it this way, please do it that way. Local planning authorities have their own way of thinking, have their own sort of plans. and I'm assuming that when I'm bringing projects forward, they are additionality and nothing else. So I don't look at section 106, but I make sure that 106 is obviously there for that reason. But my main issue is to bring additionality to the forefront and nothing else.
Thank you. May I make what I hope is a compromise suggestion to assist Councillor Sargent and the rest of us, and that is that in future the paragraph where you talk about additionality is put in bold, and that way it will be easier for Councillor Sargent and others to be able to spot it within the report, because I have to say additionality really is important. When I was on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, it was one of the areas I was concerned about within the housing portfolio. So I think it's a perfectly valid challenge, but given that the work is already done, highlighting it by putting it in bold may be of assistance.
You do that.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent, may I pass on to Councillor Fuller, or do you want to come back?
Yeah, do pass on, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to add that I think the reference to local plan figures is a bit of a red herring and wouldn't help us at all. It's, dare I say, a bit of a Cambridge-centric approach to the rest of the county again, insofar as, you know, as we should all well know, it's often on the strategic sites, such as those mentioned in 2.2, Alchemy, Weald and Huntingdonshire, that you don't and can't hit the local plan affordable housing targets. So when I've got a large redundant airfield, the viability of delivering the infrastructure to that means there's a reduction in the amount of affordable housing. That's why then the additionality function of the combined authority can help support that. So I think to start measuring local plan affordable housing targets against this additionality would just absolutely skew what we're trying to do here. So I wouldn't necessarily support that. And if I may be so bold, Chairman, as to ask, please, a plea for the future. We spent 3/4 of an hour now pretty much talking about minutes, forward plans, how we present reports. I'd really like to get on with the business of these meetings, and we do this an awful lot. Could I ask that when there's these sort of procedural discussions and debates to be had, they're done outside of these public meetings? These are the sort of things that can be quite easily taken offline, where they don't have to involve 22 people's time sitting here debating how a report is presented.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I think that's a very sensible suggestion to all of us. On the subject of affordability and viability, unfortunately, we in Finland understand that even more than you do in Huntingdonshire. And there are significant differences between different parts of the combined authority area, which is why the discussion that we will have when the agenda item comes up in September, the report comes up about the differences in affordability and viability between the north and the south of the area, will be so valuable. Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to comment on this agenda item? No. If not, the committee is being recommended to commit grant funding of £645,000, equating to £32,250 per unit, from the £100 million affordable housing programme to enable delivery of 20 additional shared ownership homes at Roman Fields, Paston, Peterborough. May I have a proposer and a seconder for this recommendation by raising your hands, please? Proposed by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Allen. Thank you very much indeed. Does any member object to this being agreed? I will go to a vote if I have to. But if any member doesn't want to just accept this, then please do put up your hand and we'll have a Councillor Sargent. So we'll move to a vote on this recommendation. I'll now ask each committee member in turn, if they agree with the recommendation, please unmute your microphone to respond. Councillor, sorry, do you want to speak, Councillor Sargent? Right. So each committee member in turn, if you agree with the recommendation. Councillor Steve Allen.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Hickford.
Agree.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Sargent.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Smith.
Agreed.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, for. Would the Democratic Services Officer report the outcome of that vote, please?
So that's,
Democratic Services, I think you may
Six
be...
votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, 6 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Right, agenda item 2.22 is the Alconbury Weald MANGPM proposal. Asma, again, I wonder if you would be kind enough to introduce this item.
Thank you, Councillor. Alconbury Weald Alconbury by MAN GPM. They are a for-profit organisation. They are asking to commit grant funding for £4,425,000 to enable delivery of 94 additional units at the above address. This is a site that's being developed by Crest Nicholson. They're going to acquire 124 units and provide 94 of those as affordable housing. 65 of them will be affordable rent and 29 will be shared ownership. The land is also shared with Crosskeys Homes for Section 106 homes, and Halo are also on that site doing their shared ownership. The homes are a mixture of 1 to 4 bedroom homes, and Hunts have been happy to accept the mix of this scheme.
Excellent, thank you very much. First of all, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. So I hope this doesn't sort of fall foul of what Councillor Fuller feels we should deal with outside the meeting, but I've just got a couple of points that relate to this and some of the other applications we've got. So just to say that I'm aware that this has the support of Councillor Fuller's lead housing officer, so that's fine by me. But there are just a couple of unanswered questions. So as Asma pointed out, these are for-profit providers, and I think we've got a couple of them. So my understanding is that these companies don't manage the stock themselves. So I can't find sufficient information within the board papers to make it clear to me how they plan to manage the properties. But the biggest question mark is the suggestion that these will be a long-term management contract or lease with, in this case, MAN GPM, stating for a minimum of 10 years. So does that mean that the properties could be sold on the open market after 10 years? In which case, actually the argument for this being value for money slightly falls apart. I don't know whether it's in the exempt papers, but if it is, forgive me for raising it at this point in this way. And I do have another point after this, please.
Thank you.
I'm not aware that they will be sold on the open market. My understanding is that they are going to be on an extended lease with a housing association, because they're not one themselves. They're going through the process at the moment. So that will be a management lease that they'll have with the other organisation. They've mentioned various ones, but haven't picked one yet, where there are long-term leases. But my understanding that those units would come back into the ownership of MAN GPM after that lease, either to be extended further or otherwise. Okay, so that worries me even more, because we don't have any certainty in that case. And actually I would, I think if we are, perhaps we need to predicate a vote on this, on clarification that these houses won't go onto the open market in 10 years' time, because that's not what we're meant to be funding. So, as long as they are going to be, they're going to remain as affordable housing in perpetuity, I'm really happy with it. If that's not the case, and actually I think, we've got to be absolutely clear if we're dealing with these for-profit companies that actually these houses are going to remain remain leased in perpetuity. So I don't know if you want to come back on that, but I don't feel that's satisfactory. I don't know what colleagues... I'm under the impression that these houses were for in perpetuity and nothing else. Well, I think, Asma, with all due respect, I think being under the impression isn't quite enough. I think we need a guarantee here. I can always go back to them and ask them that question. I'm quite happy to do that. But as far as I was concerned with Hunts as well, talking to Hunts District Council as well, we had a 3-round conversation about the site in particular, and we were all aware of the situation. Like I said, I know that MAN GPM are not a housing association. They are going through this current process. Therefore, they're not able to own the units and manage them at this moment in time. So through you, if I may, could I suggest that we predicate approval of this on clarification
over this matter. Would that be acceptable to you and to Councillor Fuller, of course?
Well, I personally think, I don't actually like the use of the word in perpetuity. That has some implications which I find somewhat more difficult. The leases being for a minimum of 10 years, I took to being leases to other registered providers. And I assumed, I have to admit, I assumed that if such a lease were terminated, another registered provider would be found, or if they were a registered provider themselves by that time, that Man GPM would then be responsible for taking over the responsibility of maintaining the units as affordable housing. Now, that was my reading of this. I accept that it could be read in another way. So I don't think, unless officers tell me otherwise, that it's unreasonable for us to say, subject to these homes being in the long term being for affordable housing. I don't think there's a problem saying that. I'm not quite sure whether in perpetuity will actually be the appropriate wording to use. But
yeah, I mean, I'm fine for in perpetuity, but you know that these are going to be, yeah, you know, for the foreseeable future. But you know, I just think there's a risk. There's a lack of clarity here about whether these could end up on the open market in 10 years' time, and that wouldn't look good.
Yeah, but even though they are a profit organisation, sorry, Councillor.
No, please do.
Even though they are a for-profit organisation, that does not mean that they're going to put units on the open market. That's not my understanding. They have said to me basically these units are for Alconbury Wheel, they're for people who are on the housing register, for key workers, they want to make it a mixed community. They basically haven't, they're just not a housing association in their own right, and they are doing that as we speak, and therefore they said we would provide a lease for 10 years to allow them to get to that stage where they would be able to manage the properties in their own right afterwards.
Roger, would you care to respond?
I think just to cut through this, I think we're quite happy to accept the predication that after 10 years they won't be returning to open market units in some way, and there will be continue to be in a form of affordable housing. We will double check that, but I'm very happy to accept that because I'm pretty certain that that is not going to be the case.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So I'm very, I will be happy to vote for it on those terms. So thank you. If there's one other point I'd like us to bring up, and that relates to this and others, and it's about rents. So there's very little in any of these papers about what rent is going to be charged on any of these schemes. And in normal circumstances, I think we've always taken the local housing allowance as representative of affordable housing, and that was about 60% of market rent. But of course, you know, this year, that's because of COVID, that's been increased to over 80% of the market rent, which means that rent set at this new level could be unaffordable to many local people who actually need social housing. So it would help to have further information about the intended rent levels and how that's being calculated. And I think that would help colleagues decide, you know, whether these properties are truly affordable. And I've been told today, rather worryingly, that we've already seen, and when I say we, I mean my own council, a for-profit organisation indicating that it's their intention to use the new LHA rates as a basis for setting their affordable rents, which actually means that they will become unaffordable. So again, I think as now, and certainly for future reference, we need clarity in these papers about what rents are going to be charged, you know, how they are being calculated, in order that we can make a judgment about the level of affordability and whether it is going to be meeting our own local housing need.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I have to say that as far as affordability is concerned, there are some quite strict guidelines which are set by central government as to what would qualify as being an affordable property and what is not. Now, that definition isn't the same as it being affordable for individuals. And then I think there's often a lot of confusion caused by the use of the word affordability. But there is a very strict technical definition as to what is affordable under different tenures, and that is something which I know that officers do look at. Would any officer care to make a comment about the affordability issue?
Can I just make you aware that I had spoke to Frank and Ian Jackson from Man GPM about the issues of local housing allowance, and that the units should be affordable. And I was under the impression, and so was Frank myself, that this was going to happen, and that we've all agreed that they will be at local housing allowance rates.
Thank you.
Shared ownerships obviously are different.
Of course. Yes, Councillor Smith.
So could I just confirm whether we're talking about the pre-COVID or the post-COVID rate, because it's changed by 20%?
I understand that, but I couldn't answer that for you. I was going on what I knew. Yeah, I knew was the local housing allowance just pre-COVID-19.
Yeah. Okay. But again, I think this is another issue that we need to be clear about moving forward, because it's 20% is a lot of money.
I understand that.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is another illustration really of the need to make sure these reports are structured in a way that we don't have to enter into these sort of discussions and debates really, because as Councillor Smith says, you know, 20% is a significant amount of money for people to afford, and 80% is significantly higher. So I would say that this is another piece of information which, if it was in the report, it would be much easier to make all our judgments before we come to the committee, rather than raising the issue at committee, because it then becomes a checkbox in my own mind as to what's going on. Can I also highlight this issue of the 10 years, not so much in terms of hopefully we get to 25 years or whatever it happens to be, but it would be useful to have a short report from the director on how long these grants are valid for, if you like, and if there is any, after how many years we would expect perhaps them to be able to be sold off. But at the moment, I'm not very strong on how housing associations operate. So if we knew it was, say, 25 years and that's the standard and that's what Homes England work to, then I will be happy with that. But it certainly raised some alarm bells when I saw this 10-year as well, and I probably interpreted it in a similar way to Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. Rather than having a report coming back to this committee, may I suggest that the director sends an email to all members of this committee with the information which is available concerning the length of time that these properties will be able to be deemed to be affordable. So just how that works and how it works at a national level, because I must admit I don't know the answer to that. I think it would be interesting. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm quite happy with what Councillor Smith has suggested, that we predicate our decision based on seeking those assurances that she's looking for. I think that's perfectly reasonable, and I'm happy to support that. What I would want to do is for us to delay making this decision today until September whilst we seek that. But if we can delegate that perhaps to officers, I'd be quite happy with that. Councillor Sargent's last point is also quite useful as well. And I think we probably worry ourselves about that word for-profit housing associations, which I know don't sit well ideologically with everyone. However, you know, it should be pointed out, Chairman, that not-for-profit registered providers do frequently sell their housing stock as well on the open market. We have many disposals in Huntingdonshire throughout the year from existing providers. It's part of their business model. It will be for a for-profit as it is for not-for-profit. So I'm not saying I would like to see us lose these grant-funded additional properties in 10 years' time, but it would just be useful perhaps to ascertain the CPCA's view on what not-for-profit housing associations do with grant funding compared to our expectations for for-profit, because I don't think there probably should be a difference in that.
Very helpful, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fairly relaxed on all the points made. I just would like a bit of clarification, because the disposal after 10 years or 25 years is relevant, but it's who it's disposed to that I have a concern about. Now, I'm very happy for the aspirational tenant who then wants to acquire the premises. That's how a very successful change around in the UK was built some years ago. What I'd hate to think is that we facilitate the building of a large development and then dispose it to commercial landlord to their advantage. So I don't know whether we can have clarification or whether I'm just pie in the sky with my dreams.
Councillor, I think we all agree with you that that clarification will be very helpful from the director, and if he does send that clarification in an email to us, I think it will be very useful. As a general principle about how all developments, not merely this one, are to be treated in the future. And in this particular case, the problem is that we've been given this date that the registered provider's lease may be terminated after 10 years. And if we'd just been told that they will work with registered providers, we wouldn't have asked this question at all. It's the fact that they have put that 10-year figure in which has caused us in this particular case to start asking these questions. But the point which you're raising is not specific to this particular site. It's a much more general one, and I think it will be very, very helpfully answered by the director in an email to all members of this committee. Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point on the rent scales and so forth. If we were to go into the exempt items, we'd be able to see that the rent figures are actually specified within those items. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Those papers.
I know we did say that we wouldn't go into the exempt items, but thank you for that. That is helpful. Thank you. Right. So the slightly amended report recommendation is that on the assumption that this is affordable housing for the foreseeable future, that we commit grant funding of £4,425,000 from the £100 million affordable housing programme to enable delivery of 94 additional units with a mix of 65 affordable rented and 29 shared ownership homes at Alconbury Weald in Alconbury. Do I have a proposer and seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Fuller proposed and Councillor Ambrose-Smith seconded. Would any councillor not be in agreement with this being accepted unanimously without a vote? If so, please raise your hand. No one raises their hand. Therefore, I'll declare this has been accepted unanimously by the committee. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, which is the March Town Centre proposal. This is one where I believe an email has gone round to members of the committee shortly before the meeting took place. Within the confidential papers, there was an unfortunate misprint which showed that the items were to be completed, the buildings were to be completed some 6 months, sorry, before the start on site, which was obviously just a typing error, and the correction has been emailed around about that, the date for completion. So just bringing that to everyone's attention if you haven't already seen it, that has been noted, it was just a typing error. Asma, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Councillor. This was on my pipeline of some of the units coming forward, 3 individual sites within the March Town Centre to commit grant funding of 3,520,000 deliverable units, 90 of them in total, 70 are affordable and 20 are shared ownership.
Thank you.
Units are going to be of high sustainability features, high energy efficiency levels to reduce fuel poverty, close to the town centre amenities, and the new homes will range from a 2 to 4 bedroom.
Thank you very much. Members, do any members have any comments or questions? Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. So on page 68 in 3.5, it's saying it's a windfall site. So can't find anything to indicate why that might has there been a viability test which actually says that it's not viable to supply any affordable housing on this site? Because I know
I can't hear a word that Sergeant's saying. Sorry, I can't hear a word that Councillor Sargent said.
Councillor Sargent, could you just try again, please? You did get a lot clearer towards the end. So
Oh, did I?
try-
Sorry.
The first part, the last part went too quiet for me.
Yeah, I'm looking away to another screen with the information on, so that's probably why you're losing my voice slightly. I'll try and cover both screens at the same time. Yeah, so it says that it's a windfall site, and otherwise all houses would be for sale. Yeah, so which indicates to me that the viability test says that it's not viable to provide a sufficient level of affordable housing on this site, when I note the local plan says that there should be 25% affordable housing in
Are
this.
we looking at the right project? Because this is not a windfall site, this is the March Town Centre. I think you're referring to a different project.
Right. I'm on page 68, is that the wrong one?
I haven't mentioned that it's a windfall site. I've mentioned that it's March Town Centre with 3 individual sites in the Fenlands area.
No, actually, I think, Councillor Sargent, you're right in that there is reference to windfall site under 3.5. However, I think the point that's being made is that all of the units on the site are going to be affordable units, and therefore, from our point of view, it's being treated as a windfall site, and that there's no market housing on the site to support any Section 106.
Just to be of assistance to Councillor Sargent, since this is my local authority area, I can tell you that a viability report has been produced and published to do with our impending new local plan. And it's abundantly clear from that viability report, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted the debate to take place in September about the differences between the north and the south of our combined authority area, that in most of Fenland, there is no availability, there is no affordability for no viability for affordable housing. There's no viability for Section 106 agreements. There's no viability for school funding. And we have that report as part of our impending local plan determination, which is going on at the moment. So we are in a very different position, I'm sorry to say, from the southern part of the combined authority area. And we have many, many developers who come before us and who are able to prove, using the rules which exist, which I don't personally agree with, but that's a different issue, but they're able to prove that there is no viability for anything to be provided to the community, which is an appalling position to be in, but that is where we are.
So if I could just clarify, Chair, either through yourself or through the officers. So is this a blanket thing for Fenland, or is there a test for every site? And has this site been tested and found not being viable for affordable housing?
There are differences in different parts of Finland, I have to say. It's not all exactly the same, but it's a difference between no affordability at all and very little affordability. The difference is minuscule, and it's an enormous problem we've got when we're looking at our future local plan about how we're going to get any affordable housing in the future at all within Finland. It is a very different scenario from what you see in the south of the county. So it's not at all unreasonable for it to be said that all of these affordable houses are additional ones, because the way in which planning works in Finland, an applicant could put in an application and would, on appeal, manage to get all affordable housing removed from a site such as this.
Right, but sorry, can I just clarify if the viability test has been done for this specific site, then perhaps the officer can answer?
I can't, I'm afraid. I don't know that question. That would be something that planning would be able to answer.
Any other comments from anyone? Okay.
I'm assuming that if the housing association hadn't approached us, that there was all of this done, the viability issues and everything. I cannot say much more than that. I hadn't been made aware of any planning issues or reserved matters for this case. So I'm under the impression that all the units that are coming to us are affordable as additional as well.
And I can tell you from my personal experience that is consistent with what we see elsewhere within Finland. Any other comments from anyone? No. Okay. Then we are being asked to commit grant funding of £3,520,000 from the £100 million affordable housing programme to enable delivery of 90 additional units with a mix of 70 affordable rented and 20 shared ownership homes within March Town Centre. I'm happy to propose this from the chair. May I have a seconder? Councillor Fuller, thank you very much indeed. Does anyone want me to go to a vote on this? Councillor Sargent wishes me to go to a vote. That's absolutely fine. We will now move to a vote. I will ask each committee member in turn if they agree with the recommendation, and please unmute your microphone to respond. Councillor Steve Allen.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Hickford.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Sargent.
Abstain.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Councillor Sargent.
Sorry. Abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Agree.
Thank you. I should ask Democratic Services what the result of that vote was, please.
So that's 6 for and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 2.24, and that is the site at RAF Upwood, Evira. Asma.
Thank you, Councillor. The former RAF Upwood, Ramsey Road in Bury, Hunt. It's to commit grant funding of £2,720,000 to enable the delivery of 64 additional units with a mix of 32 social rent and 32 shared ownership units at the RAF Upwood site. This site has many challenges. It has bats, drainage and a viability challenge. The units range from 1 to 4 bed and the site will provide much needed housing. The site at the moment is in reserved matters pending the outcome of the viability challenge.
Thank you very much. And I do see that there is a part of this report saying that if it turns out not to be possible to have the full amount of affordable housing which is requested, that the quantum of the grant would be subject to review on a pro rata basis.
That's correct.
Thank you. Members, any questions, comments? Not on this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith.
Sorry.
Are you trying to indicate?
Sorry. Struggle to do that. Yes, please. I know we've talked at length about space standards, but this one really is pushing it pretty close to the mark. And I absolutely understand what Asma said today and on a previous meeting that planning permission is given on these things, and it's not up to us to be criticising what the local authorities give planning permission for. But I do think we should be doing what we can to use our influence to make sure that we're not delivering housing that's only 86%. That really, we've already been told that 85% is the cutoff of completely unacceptable. And I'm not saying we shouldn't support this, but I think we could be doing more up front to be encouraging developers to be delivering housing that has decent spaces, particularly in light of all COVID. And you've only got to go back and to the Victorian times, the Industrial Revolution, to understand what overcrowding did for people. And we're already seeing the impact of COVID, of high density living in high density places at the moment. So I think we need to be revisiting this and taking a rather stronger view.
You're saying in general terms rather than this.
Yeah, yes, yeah. But I mean, this one is cutting it too close to the mark. I won't vote against it because we need housing. But I would be pleased if in future we didn't see proposals for 86%.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I do tend to agree with Councillor Smith broadly on this point. However, I think, and this has been my concern before, I think for the combined authority to take a blanket approach to this fails to recognise the individual challenges, not only in each district but in each site. So a bit of background on this site. It's a very, very difficult unused brownfield site that has needed redeveloping for many, many years, and unfortunately commercial developers have just not been able to make it stack up. Avera, I think most of you will know, is a registered provider-led developer by Cross Keys Homes and others, and I don't think we can accuse them of trying to put profit before their social purpose, but it just comes down to the point, sometimes you do have to compromise on something if it means bringing these underused but developable sites that will bring extra homes forward for Huntingdonshire. And on this occasion, perhaps that standard is what we've had to compromise on slightly to see that site come forward. But there's been a lot of calls over the years for something to happen there. I was personally very pleased when Avera managed to come forward with a workable plan. Is it perfect? Possibly not in every way, but it does meet Homes England standards. It has met the planning policies of Huntingdonshire, and I see no reason why we shouldn't support it on that basis, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I just want to reflect on what an interesting discussion it will be in September, really, because this is obviously another factor in terms of the variability across the combined authority area. And I'm very struck by what Councillor Bowden said earlier about the situation in Fenland, which I wasn't fully aware of. And can we please make sure that in the report we see in September, things like space standards are included, and rather than the report just being written by our officers, I think it's important that we get the input also by housing officers from the different authorities, really, in terms of the pressures that they're under and the impact on things like space standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. I think that our officers are in regular contact with the officers in each of the individual local authorities, and I think that they are, and the report will be informed by the contacts that they have had. Right, any other comments or questions on this particular item? No? Then the recommendation is to commit grant funding of £2,720,000 from the £100 million Affordable Housing Programme to enable delivery of 64 additional units with a mix of 32 social rented and 32 shared ownership homes at the former RAF Upwood site. Will any member want me to? Councillor Hickford. You're proposing already?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Well done. Seconded by Councillor Fuller. Thank you very much indeed. Any member want to go to a vote on this, or can I take it that this is agreed? Councillor Sargent wants a vote, which is absolutely fine. We'll now move to a vote. I'd ask you each to, in turn, if you agree with the recommendation, and please unmute your microphone to respond. Councillor Steve Allen.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Hickford.
Agree.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Sargent.
Abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Agree.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, agreed. Democratic Services. I have the result of the vote from Democratic Services.
6 for and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much indeed, very much appreciated. Move on to the fifth item now, which is the agenda item for Stand Ground. Asma again, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Stand Ground in Peterborough. It's owned by Cross Keys. They're asking to commit a grant funding of £1,260,000 to enable the delivery of a 100% affordable housing site of 28 units. This is a windfall site. The rents will be set at no higher than LHA rates, and all the units, I believe, will comply with NDSS. The council are happy with the mix, and it would benefit the people of Peterborough with the supply of this type of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member have any comments to make on this agenda item? Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting here. I think this is the one where potentially our grant will be variable depending on the viability test, if I'm right, which it's interesting. This is it perhaps at a different stage, is it, to some of the others? I hope I've got the right one.
I think that's incorrect.
No, it was the previous agenda item, Councillor.
Okay, all right. I'll put my hand back down. Thank you.
No trouble. Thank you very much indeed. Any other member wish to make any comment? Then we are being asked to commit grant funding of £1.26 million from the £100 million affordable programme to enable delivery of 28 affordable rented additional units at Stand Ground, Peterborough. May I have a proposer and seconder, please? Councillor Allen proposing, and Councillor David Ambrose Smith seconding. Thank you, councillors. Does any councillor want me to call a vote, or may I accept this as being unanimous? No councillors indicated they want us to have a vote on this, so we'll accept that as being agreed unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, members. We can now move on to agenda item 2.3, and I'm pleased to say we're 7 minutes ahead of schedule, and that is the £100 million affordable housing programme update. And may I ask Roger Thompson to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The report is now in what is, hopefully people go familiar, sort of usual format. If I may first, actually, I'll just go to the appendices that were attached just to talk people through those. So we have an updated appendix which shows the locations of the schemes around the combined authority area. We have our full programme schedule which lists all of the schemes that have been approved either by board or committee which form part of the programme, and possibly most helpfully we have the bar charts that shows the stage of completion, starts on site and approvals. Just looking at those bar charts, and I'll come briefly to it in the text in a minute, that the summary position is that prior to committee today we had 1,290 units that were approved for the programme, 591 units had started on site and 89 units had completed. In terms of financial performance, 47.68 million of the money has been contractually committed now. We've had a couple more grant agreements signed since we last met, and 19.5 million is in the process still of being contracted. Approximately 38.5 million has actually been paid out on the various schemes to date. The main issue, I won't go through the individual schemes which are added from the last committee because people are aware of that. We've had one scheme withdrawal. It's a relatively small scheme at Papworth. This was one of the original early win schemes where I think it was apparent actually that the applicant was potentially intending to use the grant to subsidise the delivery of the 106 units, and we had a discussion with them about additionality, and I think it was concluded actually that they weren't able to use the grant to create additional units above the 106 obligation, and therefore we agreed that they won't take any grant up on that scheme, sort of regrettably, but that was their position. Our starts on site across the programme, from when we last reported that we were at 483, so we're at 591. That is in part because some of the schemes that we have approved had already started on site, and therefore we're counting those as starts on sites. In terms of risks and issues, which is probably the main thing at the moment, COVID is obviously still having an impact. We're having a brief discussion with Councillor Sargent before we started, and I think some sites are back and are functioning with the new social distancing rules. Other sites may not quite be back yet, and programmes are probably slipping generally across the region. So I think over the next period we are anticipating seeing some more starts on site from the total shutdown that we were in, but nevertheless that sort of progress will be slow and steady is our perception. There is a continuing and potentially growing market risk, which rather ironically may be working slightly in our favour, and I'll explain why in a minute. So we are seeing now reports and coming out in things like the nationwide price data, where we are seeing, notwithstanding house sales, I'm delighted here in Cambridge still going through, other locations maybe not being quite so confident or buoyant, and that's starting to show in some of the data. what it seems to be doing actually is pointing some of the developers into the direction of thinking of things other than pure open market housing. And hence we're seeing quite a high level of inquiry at the moment, and in part reflected in the number of units at this committee. And to be frank, we're hoping that when we have our next committee, we'll have a continuing sort of healthy number of schemes coming through as a result of that. So COVID is not knocking our programme, as some might maybe originally have thought, thinking, oh, we're going to be in real trouble now. In some respects, it's sort of acting as an aid and giving some focus towards affordable housing. So not all bad news out there, I think, would be my observation. That's where I'll stop at the moment. If anyone's got any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Roger. That was extremely helpful. Councillor Sargent first.
Yeah, a couple of points. So I'll start with the first one, Chair. So I note the comment about the inquiries coming through. And my question really there is, I know previously that most of these end up with being shared ownership. Would in future it be more of a mix of it being rented and shared ownership? And also, while we're on that particular subject, I think we agreed at the last meeting that in Appendix 1 in future we would have an indication of the tenure type on the table, and that hasn't worked its way through yet.
Yes, thank you for that. We will drop in the tenure type, and you're absolutely right in terms of a further breakdown, if you like, of the portfolio. In terms of unit mixes, actually, I think it's quite healthy. If you look at the mix of the papers that we've seen today, there's been a whole range of papers today, quite a lot of affordable rented papers. One scheme has social rented units in it, and a bit of shared ownership as well. So I know back in April, it seemed like we were sort of shared ownership centric, but I think this month indicates that actually there is quite a wide range of tenure mixes being considered, and indeed committee today has approved those.
Yeah, I think it was specific to the inquiries you're getting coming through, which is really a conversion perhaps from market housing to housing that we might help provide. So is there going to be a good mix in those housing inquiries that come through in terms of rented and shared ownership?
Yeah, I would anticipate a mix, but I also don't necessarily have a crystal ball always. So I would anticipate there being a mix, but that doesn't mean we might not have a loading in September towards a particular form of tenure. We're in quite early stages with some of those providers on terms of unit types at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you. And Councillor Sargent, you said you had another point.
I have, Chair, thank you. Yeah, it was really about starts on site. So I note earlier on when we were looking at Cambridge City, it's over 60%, but it looks like for the combined authority, we're still at in the low 30s perhaps. And we did hear earlier on that the government was expecting this to be within a year that we get the other 70% delivered. Now, hopefully we will get 2 years to do that, but with the current market and perhaps downturns, I'm very concerned that we'll actually get to the 2,000 homes in the next 2 years, and that's a hell of a steep increase in the delivery when we've only managed to get 30% in the first 3 years. So perhaps the housing director can comment in a bit of detail on this, please.
Yeah, we've had various disruptions during some of the front end of the programme, but inevitably I think the starts on site were always going to be loaded towards the back end of the programme, because you have to go through that process of whether it's design, planning, getting all the sites ready to go before they're physically able to put a brick in the ground and start construction. So I think it was always likely to be backloaded. The important thing I think is that we continue to see a large number of units coming through for approval, because that is building up the pool of schemes and units that we are expecting to see starting on site. And the expectation is that those starts on site, now we're through hopefully the worst of the COVID disruption, and we can't be totally certain about that, will pick up. We've seen a bit of a pickup in the last month, and hopefully that will accelerate. Yes.
Yeah, I suppose one of the comments I would make is in the 591, I think you said so far, about 240 or 250 have actually been just infrastructure projects. So that gave us quite a big boost. Are we expecting any more of those to come along?
Yeah, I was talking to Homes England the other day, and I think we are expecting the rest of that scheme for us to be able to count them as starts before March next year. So we are expecting all of that to have started. Technically, we possibly could be counting them now, actually, because the contracts are all placed for those flood remediation works, as I understand it. And within our definition of starts on site with Homes England, sorry, with MHCLG, that is part of the definition, but we haven't counted them yet. And obviously there's several other schemes where we are expecting now, hopefully the handbrake's being taken slightly off in the construction industry, that the starts will start to pick up. Yeah, and it is a key indicator, absolutely. So we are very aware of it.
Thank you, Roger. Finish, Mike? Thank you. Councillor Smith.
No, thank you. Yes, and I was going to ask for the information about tenure, which Mike's already done. I'll just take the opportunity to say the reporting we're getting in the appendices now is a huge improvement on what we had before, and I think I said last time. So really helpful to have it presented in this way. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I have to say that I was very pleased, to be quite honest, with the numbers which are shown in the report. I know that there is a tail end effect so far as starts on site are concerned, but one is now within striking distance of that 2,000 figure as far as authorisations are concerned. And I personally found that number very encouraging. Councillor David Ambrose Smith, you did have your hand up. Did you want to speak?
The question was answered, really, but...
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Right, well, we're being asked to note the progress of the delivery of the £100 million programme. May I accept that we all are willing to note that report? Anyone object to that? Please raise your hand and we'll have a vote. No? Then we note that report. Thank you very much indeed, Roger. Moving on from that to agenda item 2.4, pages 105 to 112, which is the allocation policy for the £100,000 homes. And may I ask Emma Grimmer to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. You'll recall that the board approved the business case for the delivery of the 100k homes across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough earlier this year. And this product will enable people to live and work locally. What you have before you today is the next step in securing that live and work element of the scheme. The allocations policy itself sets out the high-level principles and criteria for a two-stage process. The first stage is eligibility for things like meeting the minimum and maximum income limits, local connection, and requires that people do not currently own their own home. The second stage of the process is points and priority. And priority will be given to those who score the most points, and those points are awarded for employment and connectivity, thus meeting the live and work local. What isn't very clear in my report, and I apologise to members for this, is the allocations policy is actually one of two documents to be approved by this committee. And the next document is the guidance document, which will set out a lot more of the detail about how the policy will operate, and it will come back to this committee for approval. Such things include definitions, what evidence someone needs to submit. It will also include how an application will be assessed, in particular who will carry out the assessment, and what mechanism will be in place for complaints, appeals and reviews. So the intention today is to ask the committee to approve the principles of the allocations policy that will enable us to continue to build the guidance document that will be drafted to accompany the policy, because they'll sit side by side. And again, Chairman, that will come to your committee for approval. So in closing, Chairman, I'd like to bring members' attention to an amended recommendation, which I believe you've all been forwarded. Following a final review of the document, we're seeking to remove little d on page 3 of the allocations policy and the corresponding number table. So therefore, Chairman, the Housing and Communities Committee is recommended to approve the principle and structure of the 100k allocations policy, noting the removal of the local connectivity category D, and then further delegate authority to Director Commercial in consultation with the Chairman of the Housing and Communities Committee to make the amendments to the allocation policy, so long as they don't interfere with the general principles or structure of the policy. Chairman, I also have my colleague Emily Mulvaney here with me to assist in answering any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, that's helpful. May I just point out to members that the removal, which is being proposed, is to remove the local connectivity points related to being born in the relevant city, town or parish. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. Members might or might not be aware that I emailed Councillor Bowden today asking for this paper to be withdrawn because I don't think it's currently, with all due respect to officers, I'm sorry, I don't think it is concise enough for us to make a decision on it. So I'm really disappointed that there was no consultation with any of our local authority officers over this, bearing in mind that, you know, the majority of us are run our own housing and have huge expertise. So that seemed to be a bit of a missed opportunity. I'm very pleased to see that you've pulled out D on page 3, being born in the relevant city, town and parish, because actually I took some legal advice on this, and the indications are that it's not actually legal. This was potentially hugely discriminatory, and I'm sure the last thing the combined authority wants to do is be discriminatory. So Emma's just said this was part of the first part of two parts. My recollection of reading this was that the guidance documents, we were going to delegate responsibility for approval of the guidance documents, and actually all the detail, the answer to all the questions I have, are most likely going to be in those guidance documents. So I'm afraid I'm absolutely not prepared to delegate the second part of this, because actually this is really critical stuff. So, you know, there's no detail about what we mean about minimum maximum incomes. Is that going to be different from the national limits set for shared ownership? Also, no reference to that would take into account the local housing prices in each area, which we've already heard from Councillor Bowden are enormously different. And what about people's savings? What's there to stop somebody selling their house, plugging all the money in the bank or on the stock market, and then, you know, taking advantage of a £100,000 house? So, you know, actually, the really important thing is that this is basically an absolutely enormous subsidy. And if we're going to give people an absolutely enormous subsidy for a house, which I don't have an issue with in theory, it does mean that the allocations policy has to be above all things fair. And it's got to be focused on what meeting our need is. So again, there's no recognition in this about the people who actually we need to live in our area. So if I think about my own village, which is a large village with lots of elderly people here, including my own 80-year-old mum, and a shortage of carers. So, you know, my village needs more people who will support all my elderly and sick and, you know, other people. And when we look at Addenbrooke's, obviously, you know, there's huge challenges there for their staff in that the people doing so many of the jobs absolutely cannot afford to live here. So, you know, they are probably living a long way away, maybe in Bedfordshire, but are people who are vital to the future of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but who may not be eligible for these houses, even though they're exactly the people that we need to live here. So, you know, I haven't been consulted about this. My officers haven't been consulted about it. You know, there's a lot of work to do to make sure that these enormously subsidised houses go to the people who need them and the people who we need to live and work in our areas. You know, this isn't about eligibility. This is about need from the point of view of those, you know, those potential beneficiaries of this subsidy, and us benefiting from having, you know, the workforce that we currently need here. So I would appeal to members, the colleagues, that this is not the time to be taking this forward. It needs to go away. There needs to be some serious engagement with our regional housing board, which I think we all have officers sitting on, and then it needs to come back to us when it's in a state where all our questions, you know, we haven't got so many questions, and you know, there isn't so much uncertainty about whether this is actually going to do what we need it to do.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm afraid what I heard you say about the delegation concerning the guidance didn't seem to match what I think Emma said about what the arrangements were going to be so far as guidance was concerned. And I wonder, Emma, if you could just elucidate on that, please.
But these delegate authority to direct a commercial. I don't know what direct a commercial is. Delegate authority to direct a commercial in consultation with the chair, that's yourself, to make amendments to the allocations policy, so long as these do not interfere with the general principles. I mean, I took that to mean that was this second document, but actually I'm not happy for anything to be delegated, I'm afraid. This is all too critical.
I believe that sorry, Emma, if you could explain.
I can clarify that the intention of firstly starting with a delegation to the director commercial in consultation with the chair was to make minor amendments to the consultation to the policy that you see in front of you, and that's to make small tweaks and changes so long as it doesn't alter the structure. It does not provide a delegation for the second document, which will come to this committee. So it's the second document is not included in that recommendation. That's completely standalone document that we will of course take on board all the comments that have been made when drafting that document, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
So thank you, Emma, for that clarification. I think there are too many questions. There are too many questions here, you know, and we've got to start consulting with our authorities. Yeah, and so we can't just pull this stuff out of the hat. So as I say, I would like to make a recommendation that this paper is withdrawn for further consultation and further work to be done on it, and that's a formal recommendation from me, please.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I also, from my own officers, have had information that the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Housing Board had asked to be consulted on this, and that wasn't forthcoming. And we really got to make sure that we all work together across the combined authority area on housing, and the combined authority doesn't seem to be just working on its own on these sort of things. I'm also a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, and I think there's an element here that we're almost starting from scratch with our criteria when there's already government, for instance, criteria for low-cost home ownership, for instance, for shared ownership. And I would expect this sort of scheme to dovetail in with that. And perhaps we ought to be also using help to buy agents as well, which is part of the shared ownership scheme for managing this, because as much as anything, they've got a lot of people who are potentially interested in the 100k homes, but are also looking at shared ownership as well. And if you go on their website, then you can see what homes are available in your area. So I think we ought to be working more closely with these sort of bodies as well, where there's a lot of expertise and experience and things like criteria for eligibility, etc. So I would like to know from the officers if they've actually been in conversation with these sort of people on how they should best provide these sort of schemes to people. I'd also like to pick up on one or 2 points, but if we want to just get an answer on that one first, Chair, as to who we've actually been talking to in preparing this policy.
Emma or Roger?
Yes, Chairman. Okay, so I need to take a step backwards and then answer forwards. In terms of taking a step back, this is an allocations policy that many local authorities would be familiar with to see some of the criteria within it. So we have to start somewhere. As a combined authority recognises is a combined authority policy. What I can do is commit that there will be absolute engagement with all of the local authorities around the nuts and the bolts of the operation of this policy, because it will need to have small nuances in different areas. If you take the income and expenditure levels, it will be different in each constituent council's area. So it was very much the intention that we get the principles approved by the combined authority, so that we can then work with our constituent councils to work up the detail, recognising that they've got much more knowledge than we have because they know their areas. So there's that absolute commitment that we would engage. There was always the intention that we would engage with local authority areas after establishing the principles of eligibility and the point scoring mechanism. So that doesn't disaffect anyone, doesn't negatively affect any of the constituent councils. In terms of who we've engaged with going forward, who we'll engage with going forward, we have, if you talk about how we get this product on the market, we have started having conversations pre-COVID, and we'll continue those conversations post-COVID with mortgage lenders. Now, schemes like shared ownership Help to Buy don't apply, because committee must remember that this is 100% freehold ownership. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent, you said you had something else.
Well, I just want to carry on this point first, Chair, if I may. I mean, it's interesting. I went on the local Help to Buy scheme, and they have actually got some where there's no shared ownership element at all, and I couldn't quite work out how that one have managed to get on there. But it does look as though we've got the cart before the horse, because I think the officers already agreed that they should be working more closely with the experience of the local authorities on this. But to me, what we're looking at today is already too far advanced in terms of the sort of criteria that will be used. And we understand from the recommendation that the chair will be able to make small changes to this report, in fact, the policy. But it could be that after we've spoken to and worked with the local authorities, there will be significant changes to what is required. And I think it's certainly very premature, and I'll be supporting Councillor Smith's proposal that this is premature and we need to look at it again after working with the relevant local authorities and their expertise. And of course, on the Housing Board, it's not just local authorities, it's housing associations as well. So there is a wide range of experience there. But I would want to just highlight, Chair, a couple of other points. So we all know with the pandemic that in many ways the definition of key worker has been redefined. Yeah, and I would want to know what definition of key worker there would be. So the policy talks about key worker. And we're being asked to vote on it today, but we don't know what the definition will be in terms of key worker. So I would like to know what the situation is in terms of our definition of key worker. And another concern that I've got is you either live, apparently according to the criteria, in a city, a town, or a parish. Well, many people might live in a relatively small parish, perhaps, which would be something like 14th of the size of a city, for instance. So are we saying that you will score more points, perhaps, if you live in Cambridge with a population of 100,000 because you live in that city, rather than, for instance, if you lived in a parish with a population of, say, 2,000? Well, sorry, you don't actually live in the parish, you live in an adjoining parish. So you score less points because you don't actually live in that parish. This is yet another criteria which is not clear in this policy, and I'd like some explanation on what definitions we're using.
Emma?
Yes, Chairman. Okay, starting with the definition of key workers, obviously I'll need to check that point because the definition may have temporarily been included for coronavirus, so we'll need to check that position, Chairman, and we'll make it clear in the guidance document that accompanies this policy. In terms of city, town, parish, it was not points based on whether you live in a city, whether you live in a town, or whether you live in a parish. That was meant to be a catch-all, appreciating that all of the constituent councils are made up of cities, towns and parishes. So you don't get as many points. I ask Emily just to confirm my understanding of that as the author of the policy.
Yeah, Emma, your understanding is correct. You don't score a different amount of points depending on where you live. It's just whether you live in the relevant area where the 100k home is coming forward. Another quick point on definitions, so things like key workers and things like that. The reason that we've kept this allocations policy quite broad and it is key principles is because we recognise that within different local authority areas there will be different definitions of who actually are the key workers in your area and things like that. So I think the engagement with local authority areas will become really crucial in that guidance document material, where it does go into much more detail than this document, which is really the core principles of the policy.
Thank you, Emily. That's extremely helpful.
So if I could just clarify the point about parish, because I probably wasn't totally clear, Chair. So if I live in part of Cambridge, as an example, yeah, with a population of 100,000, and there's a development on the other side of Cambridge, I will score 50 points. But if I live in a parish with a population of, say, 2,000, and there's a development in an adjoining parish with a population of 2,000, I will only get 25 points. So again, some of this information isn't fit for purpose at the moment and is in fact discriminatory in terms of the availability of £100,000 houses to different people in different places. I'd be much happier personally if we talked about district council area, perhaps even, so that each area was in effect 80, 100,000, 125,000, whatever. But at the moment, the catchment areas defined by city, town and parish could easily vary by a factor of 50.
Yeah, you are completely correct with that. If you were living in a city, you could potentially be much further away than the actual development than you would be in a small parish, say. The reason that we've written it like that rather than per local authority area is the intention behind the 100k homes, and I think the intention that's been there since the beginning has been to keep people near their place of work, near where they have family connections, near where, you know, their children might be settled in the local school. Not so relevant for this because they are one beds, but it's that kind of local connection criteria that we're looking at. So if you open that up to the entire local authority area, you may risk losing that, but obviously that is a judgment call, and perhaps something that would be more appropriate but more of an administrative burden would be, say, a 5, 10, 15 mile radius or something like that, but then administratively that would be quite hard to actually to undertake.
Thank you, Emily. And I have to say, Councillor Sargent, that whilst I fully understand why it may be appropriate in Cambridge for us to take the whole of the city as one, that isn't a reflection of the reality of life out in other parts of the combined authority area, where being local to Whittlesea, for example, is nothing like being local to Chatteris. And there is a much greater degree of diversification and distance involved in some of our district councils as opposed to the city council. Councillor Fuller.
I mean,
sorry, Councillor Sargent.
Sorry, I mean, the issue really is that people won't necessarily be able to live in that particular area, yeah, because of cost. They don't own a home, they're in rented, they have to be significant distance away from that area. So their family might live in that area, but they're actually discriminated against because of cost of housing, they no longer live in that area and have to rent elsewhere. And I really don't get this argument that of a parish boundary being more significant in a district than, say, the city situation. And I think it, again, illustrates that this needs quite a bit more work to actually work out something which is fair and non-discriminatory.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. On this occasion, I agree entirely with Bridget and Mike. I think this is a very well-intentioned report, and I can understand the intent behind it. But you know, having taken an interest in policy matters quite a few years now, I can sense there'd be quite a lot of unintended consequences, particularly as a result of the scoring system. So, you know, I very much doubt I'm eligible for this scheme. So let me declare interest and rule myself out immediately, and I wouldn't be applying for this. But if I use my example, I've lived in the same town my whole life where my family have lived for generations, but I work somewhere else because the type of job I do is not available in my hometown. Now, I would be disadvantaged in this point scoring system in applying for a property in my hometown because I don't work here. So actually the weighting is very much leaned towards employment, but what that would encourage me to do if I wanted a 100k house would be to move away from my hometown to the town that I work in, because then I would get some points for living there and for working there. Well, that can't be what we're trying to encourage people to do. I thought that's the opposite of a local connection criteria. There's also too much left to chance or accident of birth, frankly, of location. So if I were lucky enough to have been born 12 miles down the road in Cambridge City, where I'm more likely to be able to find a job in Cambridge City because of its size, I would then score highly on both counts. But because I live in a small market town, that's just not going to score me as highly at all. We also need to be realistic about these 100k homes. We know they're not going to be able to be delivered in every parish across this combined authority area. So again, we are disadvantaging people that are living in smaller parishes because they'll never have the equality of opportunity of being able to score as highly as, particularly I would suggest, Cambridge and Peterborough, for example, where it's much, much more likely that people will be living and working in the same place. So I just think it's that key point is around equality of opportunity here that we're trying to achieve. The point system as it is doesn't do that. And I think there's so much here. It's not a case of not trusting the officers. I think there's just too many flaws with the current proposal for us to delegate it. It's not minor tweaks and changes. It's actually quite fundamental to this scheme. I think we need to go back to the drawing board with it, ascertain what we're trying to achieve, because I'm not entirely clear. I absolutely support local connection criterias, but like I say, somewhere along the line that now seems to have been weighted towards employment rather than living in an area, which is not how I understood the Mayor's 100k home initiative to be targeted towards. So I'd like to see this withdrawn. I would support that if it's a formal proposal from Councillor Smith. And I think there needs to be a lot more work, a lot more engagement and consultation with those people out there who are experts in this, has already been talked about in each of our local authorities who, you know, we've got local connections criteria, we've got local lettings policy in Huntingdonshire, I'm sure other councils have as well. Let's make use of that expertise and let's bring something back that achieves the aim the Mayor is trying to do with this, and it's absolutely the right thing to do, but we need to get the detail right.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I will just point out that the connectivity measure to do with places of birth has been removed from this report. Councillor Hickford.
Chairman, if I can come back, no, that's not my point though. The point is if I moved to Cambridge 30 years ago and lived and worked in Cambridge at the point I was making, that would give me much more points, many more points than it would otherwise. So the place of birth has been taken out, but you know, by accident of birth, I live in St Ives. I've remained here my whole life. That's the point I'm making.
Thank you, Councillor Hickford.
Thank you, Chairman. I also have concerns with the point system, and I would row in behind Councillor Smith and Councillor Fuller. And I would like to come to it from a young person's perspective, because I know my children and their friends, although they lived nearly all their life in Cambridgeshire, have had to move out, even though some still work in Cambridgeshire, move out to other places, not even in Cambridgeshire, such as Newmarket and Haverhill, simply because they can't afford to rent and definitely can't afford to buy in Cambridgeshire. And I would have thought one of the points of the 100k home was to try and actually make families into families again so they could live near each other. And the way the criteria is set out at the moment is that they have to currently live here and score really well for currently living here however many years. There's no history of them living here taken into account. And I think that's very, very sad. So therefore I would support Councillor Smith and Councillor Fuller with the proposal and the seconder here.
Thank you, Councillor Hickford. There does seem to be a general consensus emerging that this paper does need to be withdrawn and does need to come back to our next meeting together, I dare say, with the guidance, so that we can consider both together after further consultation has taken place. Councillor Allen, though, you wish to speak?
Your summing up there really preceded exactly what I was going to say. I was first of all going to say that Councillor Smith's initial eloquent analysis was very persuasive, and since then it seems that every speaker has followed up on that. It's too sketchy. The devil's in the detail of a thing like this. We're all behind this fantastic scheme. We need to get it right. So it needs to go back and come back before us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. May I just call on Emma Grimmer to speak first, Councillor Smith? Emma?
Yes, of course, Chairman. I just wanted to come in just to remind members that the live and work, we did set the entire business case for 100k. It wasn't just about where you live. It was finding that balance of work as well. So you have to design a point scoring system that achieves that balance, and this does before you. However, I take on board all the comments that members have made, and I'll wait for your instruction. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. Councillor Smith, you made a proposal, and I wanted to let all other members have the opportunity to speak first, but you did make a proposal that this be withdrawn, and it was seconded by Councillor Sargent. And it does seem to me as though there is a fair amount of support behind that proposal. I don't know if you wish to speak again, or if you'd like me just to find out if any members disagree with that proposal.
So if I may just have 1 minute, I would like to support both your Councillor Boden's and Councillor Allen's suggestion that this comes back as in its entirety, because I think we're going to run into problems again if we get just this document with the guidance document to follow. I think we've got to have the whole lot together, and then, you know, and I think we need, I would really appreciate the early sight of it so we can run it past our own officers, please, so we can be properly advised and we can give early feedback about any problems that might arise, so that when we do all meet again, you know, we're all strongly behind it. So I've supported the building of £100,000 homes in South Cambridgeshire. You know, I really want to get this right, and I don't want to be going through this again. So, you know, if I would suggest that we get the whole thing together, the whole package together. We all get early sight. We all get to consult properly with our officers. We then feedback. Any tweaks take place, so that when it comes back, we're all hugely enthusiastic about it.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So if I may just slightly amend what you said, you are suggesting that this paper be withdrawn and it be returned suitably amended for reconsideration at our next meeting, together with the guidance document which goes with it.
Good.
Thank you. And Councillor Sargent, you're happy to second that? Thank you. Does anyone actually...
I can just say a few words, Chair. Sorry.
If it only adds to anything rather than just repeating, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Councillor Smith made the point about us being able to take it back to our officers because we've got early sight of it. I just want to come back to my point earlier on, that really I would want all that side to be done before it even comes to us. So it's vital that you know, the officers of the CA are talking to the officers of the various local authorities and also the housing board as well, so that it's part of a package at the end of the day. You know, we're all trying to provide affordable housing, and this is obviously a different element of that. And if we can make sure that, in effect, we've got a good blend across the CA, including the 100,000 houses, then I'm all for it.
Thank you. I'm sure that officers have taken on board all the comments which have been made by all participants today. So there is a proposal from Councillor Smith, which I went through before. Would any member want me to go to a vote on that, or are we happy just to accept it as unanimous? No one's suggesting we go to a vote, so we'll accept that proposal to withdraw this paper.
Sorry, Chair, because it's an amendment to the original recommendation, could we please go through the vote exercise?
I certainly can.
Thank you.
I'll be specific about what the proposal is.
Thank you.
It is to withdraw this paper and for an amended version to come back to the next committee meeting for reconsideration by the committee, together with the guidance which supports this proposal. And I'll ask each individual committee member in turn if they will agree with the proposal from Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Sargent. Please do unmute your microphone to respond. Councillor Steve Allen.
Agree with the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Roger Hickford.
Agree.
Councillor Mike Sargent,
For.
Councillor Bridget Smith,
Agree.
and myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, in favour, and that was a unanimous vote in favour of the proposal put forward by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Sargent. Thank you very much indeed, members. Final agenda item, or next agenda item, is agenda item 2.5 from page 113 onwards, the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme update. And may I please ask Noel Godfrey to introduce this report.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm aware that this is the first time that the Combined Authorities element of the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme has come before this committee, and previous reports have gone to the board. I recognise also it's quite a broad programme with a lot of different work streams, and I know you've had a lot of detail to deal with already, so I'll try and keep it very short. In the report, I've given some background and further details about the programme as part of the appendix for the review. But I think there's probably three main points for this afternoon. There's a proposal for 2 additional work streams to be brought into the programme. The first being what we're referring to as Keep Everyone Connected work stream, which is about the response and recovery to COVID-19. And there's a number of actions that I've highlighted in the review report, but one of the key ones is a proposal to apply to the ERDF, the EU ERDF fund, for some funding to support technology grants for small businesses to help them adapt to the current situation, which would be matched by some combined authority funding. The second one is the establishment of a new advanced connectivity and emerging technology work stream, which will really take into account the fact that when this program started, since the program started, things have moved on already, and they continue to move on in terms of the technology used for digital connectivity and how people can take up those services. So there's the proposal for a further work stream for advanced connectivity and emerging technology, with a bit of a focus there on market towns, which otherwise wouldn't necessarily get some of the new technology that's emerging around Internet of Things and other associated services. And then the third point to note is that actually these 2 additional work streams actually will fall within the existing budget envelope for the project, for the programme, for the Combined Authorities input into the programme. And in fact, the overall budget envelope has been reduced, and that's as a response to what's happening in the world of mobile technology. We still have an issue with mobile connectivity in this county, and there's absolutely things that need to be done about that. But originally it was envisaged that because there was no government action or mobile operators action, that there would need to be some infrastructure inputs and funding into the infrastructure. That's now been superseded somewhat by the government's and industry's Shared Rural Network programme, which we absolutely still need to continue to focus on, but which wouldn't need or wouldn't be value for money to put combined authority funding into. So that's why the reduction in scope in budget was agreed by the board the other week. I'll stop there because, as I said, I know you're short of time.
Thank you very much indeed, Noel, and it was a very clear report. Thank you for that. Any members who have any comments to make? Councillor Fuller first.
Thank you, Chairman. I noted that there's circa 250,000 per annum over 2 years for the Keeping Everyone Connected project. I was just wondering if you could give us a bit more information about what that might deliver. We in Huntingdonshire see digital as one of the key enablers of recovery, and I'd be quite keen, if possible, for some of that to be tied into local recovery plans at district level rather than at the wider county level.
Thank you. And yes, there is absolutely scope for that. The specific elements of funding which are identified in the Keeping Everyone Connected work stream are to support the application for ERDF funding, which will enable technology grants to be available to small businesses, and that will be across the entire area, and is very much intended to link in with the combined authority, with the business boards growth programme. But there is absolutely scope to look in terms of individual district areas, which will be very different, have different characteristics. And I know that the combined authority is also working on looking at the different how recovery will affect districts in different ways. We've done some in the case of Huntingdonshire, for example, we've already looked at some of the factors which we might use to help facilitate digital connectivity in some of the market towns, for example, in Huntingdonshire, and we'd certainly be there's certainly scope to continue that within the provisions of this programme.
Is that okay, Councillor Fuller? Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're very much working in a virtual world these days, but I'm very conscious of, is it 2 million children who aren't connected, perhaps? And I very much have benefited myself from time to time in the CAM Wi-Fi system in Cambridge, and very much support its further rollout. But if there are any opportunities where we can help children perhaps who are in disadvantaged backgrounds to get connected in what is a very difficult time for them at the moment, then I'd be very supportive of that. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak? No. Well,
Sorry, I don't know if you wanted me just to respond to Councillor Sargent's point that actually, yes, we are aware of the deficit in connectivity, particularly for a number of children at the moment, and we are actively working to support the connectivity for those areas. Yeah.
Thank you, Noel. Right, the committee is being recommended to note the progress in relation to the provision of digital connectivity infrastructure across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, to note the overall digital infrastructure budget allocation reduction from 5.6 million to 4.3 million, in line with the decision taken by the CPCA board on the 3rd of June, to approve the establishment of 2 additional work streams to support COVID-19 related business recovery activities and the rollout of smart technology to Cambridgeshire market towns within the reduced budget allocation, and to delegate to the Director of Delivery and Strategy, in consultation with the Chair of the Housing and Community Committee, the approval of the detailed business plan for the Digital Infrastructure Delivery Programme for 2020-2022. There does appear to be a general consensus in support of the recommendation, subject to any member who wishes to indicate that they want a vote to be called on this. If not, then with your agreement, we'll take those recommendations as carried. Thank you very much indeed, members. And apart from stating that the date of the next meeting is the 14th of September 2020, and that the arrangements for that meeting will be confirmed nearer the time in the light of the emerging situation, I declare this meeting closed with the apology for it being 15 minutes overrun. Thank you very much indeed, members, for all your input.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Chair, everyone.